And good morning, everybody. Welcome into our segment with Jared and Jacob from Marble City Pharmacy. And Happy New Year to you guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly.
You're not.
Is it opioid disorder, opioid use disorder.
There you go.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's
You
good. It's
did
one of your
good.
better times, yeah.
Okay. Give me a running start. I'll get that for a while.
That's right.
Opioid use disorder. Let's talk about it. What is this?
Well, you want me to go?
Either one.
I looked at you.
He looked at you.
He looked at me.
Yeah, he looked at you.
You'd think we'd have this down by now. Opioid use disorder. We've talked about drug use on this show before. I think it's important that we come back to this. Last month we talked about controlled substances. I think it's a natural follow-up to that discussion. Opioid use disorder is a term that was kind of created by our government. What it means, though, simply is, well, let's back up. What's an opioid? We got to make sure we define that. These are some of your more commonly used pain medicines, your hydrocodones, your oxycodones, your fentanyls. Those are medicines most of you have heard of, right? So opioid use disorder would be when you're taking more than you should, simply put. If you're taking the prescription for longer than is prescribed for you by the doctor. If you're taking the medicine recreationally, all that means is you don't need it, you're just taking it for fun. Of course, that happens pretty often. And then if you are addicted to the medicine, that would be the most extreme form of what we're talking about here. People who have opioid use disorder spend a lot of time and money, sometimes even finding themselves stealing from relatives, stealing pills or money from relatives. They spend a lot of time and money thinking about these medications, and then they also have a lot of craving. They're thinking about it all the time. So something that you can get dependent on.
Mm-hmm. So, Jake, what's the big deal about this?
A lot, unfortunately. And I say, give the anecdotal, it's too big, and the statistic, it's too big. Statistic is in the last 20 years or so, over 800,000 Americans have overdosed and died on drugs.
Oh, wow.
So 40,000 a year over the last 20 years or so is our average number. And that's just people who actively overdose and die in the moment. That's not people who die younger than they otherwise would have because of chronic use or things like that. It's a big number. And anecdotally, there's no one watching this show that can hear my voice this morning that doesn't know someone who suffers from opioid use disorder. You may not know who they are, but I can assure you there's no one who can hear me right now that doesn't know someone who has this. And where does that lead? Well, it leads to wrecked families. It leads to loss of jobs, decreased productivity, falling out of community, falling out of purpose, falling out of spiritual relationship with God. It impacts every aspect of your life. And again, we all know someone. And then every now and then, it will, more than every now and then, someone who starts with slightly overusing a legal prescription drug, it grows, and eventually you hear on TV about, fentanyl and and illegal fentanyl and heroin and all these things, and vast and wild things that you think you would never approach. Well, it starts small, and that's a lot of times where it ends up.
And Jake, staying with that just a second, and this can happen to good people.
Oh my goodness!
Well-meaning good people.
Yes, drug problems are no respecter of persons. You can have the greatest family, the greatest education, the greatest job. It has nothing to do with how smart you are, how educated you are, how rich or poor you are, what kind of mom and daddy you had or didn't have, what kind of preacher you had or didn't have. It's all of it. It's everybody.
So what's the government doing about this?
One of the things we want to point out this morning is the emphasis that the government has put on this. Already said that they've given this a term, opioid use disorder. The government recognized a long time ago that there was a problem here, and they have assigned a substantial, in fact, the numbers would be shocking if we actually had them, a substantial amount of money, a substantial amount of people. They've hired people, they've made task forces, and they've made coalitions, they've put laws into place, they've made campaigns. I'm sure you've seen commercials. They've tried to increase people's awareness of these problems. As far as what they've done on the drug side, they've really cracked down on doctors and pharmacists and distributors of these medications in an attempt to curb use of them. Quite frankly, and this won't surprise any of you, most of the government's efforts have been completely useless because that's just the way things work with government. I will say the one thing that I've seen come out of this that has probably been beneficial is they have, I don't know if scared is the right word, but scared probably is the right word. They've scared some of the physicians into writing less prescriptions, and in the prescriptions they do write, writing in lower quantities. I do think that that probably has been helpful. But the truth is that we've wasted a lot of taxpayer money because you don't fix problems like this on the government level, quite frankly.
Yeah. So what are doctors and what are pharmacists like yourself, what are we doing about this?
Well, in this instance, the onus really begins on the physician, unfortunately for them, in terms of how they treat people, what they prescribe, what their thoughts are behind their prescriptions, and how many pills they're giving, and things of that sort. One good thing, I'll mention a second good thing that the government has done. Jared mentioned one, and it's brought some prescribing habits down. A second good thing, and probably the only other good thing, is that they've created a database that doctors and pharmacists in hospitals connect to where if you get a controlled substance filled in my pharmacy today, by tomorrow, that's posted in a state database that doctors and pharmacists, so if you go to a different doctor in a different pharmacy tomorrow and a different doctor in a different pharmacy the next day, we'll find out. It might not be immediate, but we're going to figure it out. And so that's a big part of what the onus on physicians and pharmacists is, to not overprescribe in terms of quantity or strength, especially initially right out of a surgery or something, not overprescribe, not too many, not too strong, not for too long a time. And then, doctors also need to be able to honestly cut off patients who are clearly a problem. And then pharmacists need to track this database, make sure they're not being duped into filling stuff, and also work with the physicians on those patients who are clearly becoming a problem in both practices, both the pharmacy and the physician's clinic. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done together. A lot of it's up here, and a lot of it is having the boldness and or sometimes just the heart to step out and go, hey, I see a problem, and we need to address this here.
Yeah. So with this being said, people who need opioids, pain medication, whatever it may be, do they need to stop, or what's the answer?
This is a complicated question, of course, and I think maybe one of the natural follow-ups to this is, if you've never taken these medications before, or if you've taken very few of them before, should I just stop taking these? Should I avoid these medications altogether? And that's a complicated question, but it's a good one. My general answer to that is no. I think that understanding the seriousness is very important, which is why we're talking about this today. And I think that our philosophy should be to use only if necessary, in as small a quantity as possible. For example, if you have surgery, you're going to have some of these pain medications, generally speaking, depending on what type of surgery you have, to control the pain. It was 2019. I had a back surgery. They did some work on a herniated disc that I had. It was very painful. I got cut through the muscle. It was very painful. The physician that did my surgery, though, prescribed me 80 Percocet, which is oxycodone and Tylenol. 80. I think I took maybe 20 in the days following. I have not taken 80 total Percocet in my entire life. That's the kind of strategy that we need. First of all, he shouldn't have given me that money. That would have been great. But from the patient standpoint, only as few as you can get by with. I think those kind of strategies are what we need.
Yeah. And, there are some situations when we should, and there are some situations when we shouldn't take them.
Yeah, there are things that mix in poorly with these opioids, these pain medicines, that make you much more likely to develop an abuse problem or a misuse problem. nerve medicines, your Xanaxes and Ativans, phenobarbital, other barbiturates, alcohol, sleep medicines like Ambien, muscle relaxers, Flexeril, Xanaflex, those sort of things. Those things, if you're already having to take those for something, you add these pain medicines in, you're much more likely to develop a problem. So you got to be aware, hey, I'm already taking some things, I don't need to add more things, if at all possible. And honestly, if you've had past trouble with addiction of any kind, adding these things on might be something you really need to think about. Again, we've got a friend who, even if he gets a crazy kidney stone, which usually requires high-level opioids, he won't take anything more than ibuprofen because he's had a problem. And I can't go down that road. And so that stinks for him, and he knows it. But it's good for him and his family that he's so aware and won't fall down that path again.
So before we go this morning, for anyone watching this morning that may be struggling with opioid addiction or whatever, can they just talk with you guys and you can guide them a little bit?
My biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're in this situation, you know that you're in this situation. It's not a person doesn't depend on opioids, take too many of them, start using illegal street drugs, and they don't know it, right? It's okay. So what you need to do is ask for help. And guess what? You won't be the first person who's talked to us about that or the first person we've talked to. It's much better, and we're not going to place a stigma on you.
No.
We're going to try to help you. So it's much better to have help than it is to continue to be in denial, of course.
All right, guys. Thank you much for being with us this morning. Help Monday with Jared and Jacob on Daybreak Live. That'll wrap it up for me this morning.